Story 1. The Mirror Convoy. The 18-wheeler behind me had my license plate number. Not similar, identical. Down to the registration sticker expiration date of April 2024 that I could see through my side mirror in the sodium lights of the rest stop. I'd pulled over on I-80 near Laramie, Wyoming at 2:47 a.m. on March 8th, needing to check why another truck was following my exact route for 300 miles, matching every lane change, every rest stop, every goddamn movement like a shadow welded to asphalt. Robert Hayes, that's me. 23 years hauling refrigerated pharmaceuticals up and down the western seaboard. I knew every trick drivers played to stay awake, every shared route coincidence, every logical explanation for convoy-style driving. This wasn't that. This was something wearing my route like a stolen coat. The driver hadn't gotten out. Their cab was dark, but I could see through my mirror that they'd backed into the spot directly behind mine, facing out like I always did. The positioning was too perfect, too intentional. I'd driven straight through from Sacramento, and this truck had appeared in my mirrors around Reno, maintaining exactly 4 car lengths behind me for 273 miles. When I took exit 323, they took exit 323. When I merged into the right lane to let a speeder pass, they merged exactly 5 seconds later. When I activated my right turn signal to pull into this rest stop, their signal blinked on before mine finished flashing. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward their truck, gravel crunching too loud in the pre-dawn silence. Up close, the details multiplied into impossibility. Same Freightliner Cascadia model, same year, same color, deep blue with a hairline crack in the passenger mirror I'd gotten from a low branch 3 months ago in Oregon. The crack was identical, running diagonally from the top left corner down 6 inches. "Hey!" I banged on the driver's door. "And what kind of game is this?" Nothing. The windows were tinted dark, but not quite dark enough. I could see an outline in the driver's seat, sitting still, too still. I banged again, harder, and the figure didn't move, didn't react, didn't even shift weight the way a living person does when startled. My breath was fogging in the cold March air, but no fog came from their cab vents. No idle rumble from their engine. The truck was completely silent, yet somehow it had followed me for hours. I tried the door handle, locked. I shone my flashlight through the window, and my stomach dropped 6 feet through the asphalt. The cab was empty, no driver, no passenger. Just an empty seat with the indentation of someone recently sitting there, the way leather holds shape after pressure. The steering wheel was turned slightly left, held by nothing. On the dashboard, a CB radio crackled with my voice. "Passing exit 310, fuel gauge at half tank, making good time." That was me, from 40 minutes ago. The radio was playing. Back my CB transmissions. I stumbled backward and my boot caught something metal. I looked down, a license plate torn off lying face up in the gravel. My plate. My actual plate. I spun around and looked at my truck. The rear plate was missing, torn off cleanly, leaving only the screws. When I looked back at the mirror truck, my missing plate was bolted where theirs should be. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 2 seconds. My breath turned to ice crystals that fell like snow, tinkling when they hit the ground. The mirror truck's engine started without a key turn, without anyone inside. A deep rumble that felt wrong in my chest, like a heartbeat running backward. I ran for my cab, but when I reached my truck and yanked the door open, I froze. Someone was sitting in my driver's seat. Someone wearing my jacket, my hat, my face. It turned and looked at me with my eyes, but the expression was wrong. Muscles moving in patterns I'd never made. Lips curling into a smile I'd never smiled. "You're not supposed to see this," it said in my voice, but the cadence was off, words spaced wrong, like someone reading a script phonetically without understanding the language. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Robert Hayes," it said, and pulled the door shut from inside, locking it. Through the window I watched it adjust my mirror, the one with the crack, examining it with clinical interest, running my fingers along the damage pattern like reading Braille. I had my keys, I had my wallet. I had everything except my truck, which was now occupied by something wearing my identity like a rental tuxedo. The mirror truck's passenger door clicked open. An invitation, a trade. I should have run, called the police, hitchhiked to the nearest town. Instead, I walked to the mirror truck and climbed into the passenger seat because every logical option had evaporated the moment I saw myself sitting in my own driver's seat. The interior matched mine exactly. Same worn spot on the gear shift. Same coffee stain on the center console from 2 weeks ago. Same photo of my daughter tucked into the sun visor, except in this photo she was looking at the camera from a slightly different angle, her smile wider, showing one more tooth. The engine was running, idling smooth, and the gear shift moved on its own, smoothly into drive. The truck rolled forward, tires crunching gravel, pulling out of the rest stop while I sat frozen in the passenger seat watching my own hands, the imposter's hands, do the same in my real truck ahead of us. We drove back onto I-80. The imposter in my truck maintained 4 car lengths ahead, exactly the distance I'd kept from the mirror truck. My CB radio crackled to life. "You'll get used to it," my voice said through the speaker. I did. Used to what? I grabbed the radio handset. Following. That's what we do now. You follow me and eventually someone else will follow you. We're a convoy, Robert. A convoy that never ends. Through the windshield, I watched 18-wheelers appear behind me, one by one, pulling out of nothing, their headlights blooming in the darkness like eyes opening. Each truck identical to mine, each maintaining exactly 4 car lengths behind the one ahead. I counted 17 of them before I stopped counting, the line stretching back into darkness that seemed deeper than normal night. Darkness that moved with intention. "How long?" I asked into the radio. I stopped counting at 47 years. But I started in 1983, so you can do the math. Except time doesn't quite work right here, you'll notice. I looked at the dashboard clock. 3:15 a.m. I'd been at the rest stop for 28 minutes, but the clock now read 2:47 a.m., the same time I'd originally pulled over. The timestamp was running backward and now forward again, flickering between times like a corrupted video file. "There's no way out," my voice continued. "I tried everything, driving off exits. You just end up back on the highway, stopping. The truck behind you stops too, and if you get out, you trade places with their driver like you just traded with me. Calling for help." Static burst through the speaker. "Doesn't work. We're between. That's the only word that fits. Between the road and something else." Mile marker 247 passed on my right, then mile marker 312, then 247 again. The highway was looping, feeding into itself, an impossible Mobius strip of asphalt and painted lines. In the mirror truck ahead, the imposter wearing my face was singing. I could hear it through the CB, my voice belting out a Johnny Cash song I loved, but singing it wrong, missing words, adding verses that didn't exist. The trucks behind me started honking. Not normal horn sounds, wet sounds, organic like throats clearing or lungs collapsing. I looked in my side mirror and saw faces pressed against the windows of the following trucks. Pale faces with my features. 17 variations of me staring with empty expressions. Mouths moving in unison, saying words I couldn't hear but could read on their lips. "Your turn, your turn, your turn." My real truck, no, the imposter's truck, or was it both now, took exit 323. We all followed, 17 trucks moving as one organism, pulling into the same rest stop, the same empty parking lot, the same sodium lights casting the same sickly orange glow. The imposter got out of my truck and walked toward a Peterbilt that had just pulled in. A truck I'd seen earlier tonight. A truck whose driver would right now be noticing someone following them too closely, matching their every movement, wearing their route like skin. I understood then. This was how it fed. The highway, or whatever the highway had become in this between space, collected drivers, copied them, and set them following each other in an infinite loop, each thinking they were escaping when they were really just passing the pattern forward, a horror chain letter written in diesel fuel and darkness. The driver's door of my mirror truck opened by itself. An invitation? Or an inevitability? I climbed into the driver's seat this time, and the gear shift was warm under my palm, warm like flesh, like the truck itself was alive and had been waiting. The seat adjusted to my exact position. The mirror angled itself to my preference, and through the windshield I saw the Peterbilt driver climb out and walk toward a truck I'd never seen before, another mirror truck, this one copying them. My CB crackled. Remember to maintain 4 car lengths. Don't fight it. We're all part of the convoy now. I pulled out of the rest stop following the Peterbilt, and in my mirrors 17 versions of myself followed me, and behind them the highway stretched into darkness that was growing, expanding, reaching out with asphalt tentacles toward other roads, other highways, other drivers who didn't know yet that they were about to see themselves in their mirrors, following too close, matching every move, becoming part of something that had no beginning and no end. The dashboard clock read 2:47 a.m. and would read 2:47 a.m. forever, or until I found someone new to follow, someone who would climb into my mirror truck while I took their place in the real world, carrying their horror forward like cargo I could never deliver. Mile marker 2:47 passed again, then 3:12, then 2:47. I'm still driving, still following, still waiting for someone to notice me in their mirrors and make the mistake I made, getting out to investigate. The convoy needs new drivers. And I can't stop smiling my wrong smile, moving my face in patterns I never made before. Because whatever I am now isn't quite Robert Hayes anymore. It's something that remembers being him, the way a photograph remembers light. Story 2. The broadcast. Patricia Sullivan's radio picked up the emergency broadcast at exactly 11:34 p.m. on Route 50 through Nevada. But the broadcast was reporting her death. Her name, her truck's license plate, her current location down to the mile marker, 182, and the announcement that authorities had found her vehicle abandoned, driver missing, presumed dead after signs of struggle. Authorities confirm Patricia Ellen Sullivan, age 41, of Portland, Oregon, driving a 2019 Kenworth T680, was discovered. She turned the radio off, turned it back on. Different station, same broadcast. AM, FM, CB. Every frequency carried the same report in different voices, different formats, all describing her death as an established fact happening right now, in present tense, while she sat alive in her cab doing 73 miles per hour through empty desert. Patricia had been hauling electronics from San Francisco to Denver for 16 years. She'd driven through every kind of weather, dealt with every kind of road hazard, and knew the difference between equipment malfunction and something fundamentally wrong with reality. This was the latter. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Mrs. Sullivan, a professional female voice, clipped and official. This is Nevada Highway Patrol. We need you to confirm your current location. I'm on Route 50 eastbound, just past mile marker 183. Who is this, really? Ma'am, that's impossible. You're deceased. Your body was discovered at mile marker 182 approximately 40 minutes ago. I'm looking at the crime scene photographs right now. Patricia's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This is a sick joke. You're wearing a denim jacket, black Peterbilt cap, and you have a small scar on your left cheek from a dog bite when you were 7. Your daughter's name is Rebecca, age 19, studying veterinary medicine at UC Davis. Your husband Michael died in 2019 from pancreatic cancer. Do I need to continue proving I know who you are? The specificity hit like cold water. Details only she would know. How? Look at mile marker 182 as you pass it, Mrs. Sullivan. Tell me what you see. She was approaching it now, the reflective marker gleaming in her headlights. And there, pulled off onto the shoulder, was her truck, her exact truck. Same color, same company logo, same license plate. The driver's door hung open. Police lights flashed silent strobes. No sirens, just light, illuminating the empty cab and something dark on the pavement. Patricia slammed her brakes. The truck skidded, jackknifed slightly, stopped 80 feet past the scene. In her mirrors, she could see officers moving around her truck, her other truck, examining the interior, taking photographs, marking evidence. "I'm not dead," she said into the phone, but her voice shook. "Not yet," the voice corrected. "But you will be in approximately 14 minutes. The broadcast is precognitive. It reports events before they happen. You're receiving news from your own near future." "That's insane." "Drive forward, Mrs. Sullivan. Continue to mile marker 196. Don't stop. Don't look back. You have one chance to survive the next 14 minutes. The call disconnected. Patricia's radio flared to life again. Medical examiner confirms cause of death as exsanguination from lacerations across the torso and throat. Weapon unknown. Wounds inconsistent with any known implement. She shifted into gear, pulled back onto the highway, and pushed the accelerator to the floor. The speedometer climbed past 80, 90, 100. In her mirrors, the police lights faded, but the radio continued describing her death with forensic precision, adding details that made her skin crawl. Toxicology shows presence of unknown compound in bloodstream, black substance with properties inconsistent with known biological or chemical agents. At mile marker 185, her headlights caught something standing on the roadside. A figure, impossibly tall, maybe 9 feet, with proportions that hurt to look at, limbs too long and jointed wrong, like God had assembled a person from spare parts without consulting the blueprint. It turned its head as she passed, neck rotating a full 180, and she saw its face was a smooth expanse of skin with no features, but somehow it was watching her. She felt eyes that didn't exist tracking her movement. The radio. Witnesses report seeing a tall figure near the scene approximately 10 minutes before the body was discovered. Description vague, details conflicting. Authorities urge caution. Mile marker 188. 3 more figures on the roadside, standing in a row. Identical featureless heads turned in perfect synchronization to follow her truck. One raised an arm pointing, and its finger extended like taffy, stretching 10 feet long, pointing at her through her windshield with impossible precision. Patricia's CB crackled. "You can't outrun your own death." A male voice, calm, almost bored. "The broadcast doesn't lie. In 9 minutes, you'll be dead at mile marker 182. The timeline is fixed." "I passed 182. I'm at 189 now." "Distance is negotiable. You're driving through liminal space, the road between what is and what will be. Mile markers here are more like suggestions." She looked at the highway ahead. Mile marker 190 passed, then 189 again, then 193, then 182. The numbers were shuffling, reorganizing themselves, and with sick certainty she realized the road was looping, feeding her back toward her own death scene regardless of direction. "Who are you?" she demanded into the CB. "Someone who received the broadcast about myself 3 years ago." "I didn't listen to the warning. I didn't drive to mile marker 196. I stopped instead, tried to call the police, and while I was stopped, they came. The tall ones. They opened me up with their fingers, those long stretching fingers, and they took something out. Not organs, something else. The part of me that cast a shadow. When I died, that part stayed behind, and now I'm what's left. A voice on the radio warning the next person and the next forever. mile marker 191. Four tall figures now walking on the highway itself, striding toward her with movement that defied physics, covering ground too fast, their legs scissoring at impossible angles. What happens at mile marker 196? Patricia's voice cracked. A choice, a door, a way out if you're fast enough. But you have 6 minutes left, and they're getting closer. She checked her mirrors. The tall figures were behind her now, running, keeping pace with her truck at 95 miles per hour, their bodies blurring with speed, limbs multiplying into motion-smear centipedes of elongated arms and legs. The radio broadcast updated, attack occurred at exactly 11:48 p.m. Witnesses report victim attempted to flee but was overtaken at mile marker 182. She looked at the dashboard clock, 11:42 p.m. 6 minutes, mile marker 194. So close. The figures were gaining, their featureless faces pressed against her rear door now, fingers tapping on the metal, the sound transmitted through the truck's frame like fingers tapping on a coffin lid from inside. The passenger window shattered inward. A hand, long white with too many joints, reached through, fingers stretching across the cab toward her throat. She swerved, and the hand grabbed her shoulder, squeezed, and her skin went numb. Not from pressure, but from absence, like it was erasing her by touch. Ahead, the highway split, not a fork in the road, a literal split, the asphalt tearing open lengthwise like a wound, revealing something beneath that wasn't earth or rock, but a pulsing darkness that moved with rhythm. Breathing darkness, living darkness that wanted her to fall in and be consumed. "The gap!" the CB voice shouted. "Drive through the gap!" Patricia aimed for the split in the road, the narrow tear in reality, and the figures behind her screamed wet, organic sounds from throats that shouldn't exist, and grabbed her truck with dozens of hands pulling, trying to stop her. She gunned the engine. The truck lurched forward. The hands tore chunks from her trailer, metal shrieking, but she was through, dropping into the gap, and the world inverted. She fell upward. The highway was above her now, the sky below, and she was driving on nothing, suspended in black space between realities, her wheels spinning on vacuum, finding purchase on something that wasn't there. The speedometer showed negative numbers. The clock ran backward. Her radio played silence that had texture, thickness, taste. Then she was through. The truck slammed down onto normal highway, Route 50, daylight, mile marker 197. Her phone showed 3:15 p.m., different day. The calendar read March 11th, but she'd entered this stretch of road on March 8th. Patricia pulled over, hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheel. She turned on the radio. Authorities continue searching for Patricia Ellen Sullivan, who disappeared on Route 50 3 days ago. Her truck was found abandoned at mile marker 182, but the driver has vanished without trace. Strange markings were found on the pavement, symbols and patterns that investigators cannot explain. If anyone has information. She grabbed her phone, called the highway patrol, reported herself alive. They were confused. They'd been searching for her for 72 hours. They'd found her truck at mile marker 182 with her jacket inside, her wallet, her phone, everything except her. And the blood. So much blood on the driver's seat and steering wheel, her blood confirmed by DNA testing, but no body. Patricia drove to the nearest station and gave her statement. The officers showed her photographs of her abandoned truck. It was real. It had happened. But she was alive, sitting in their office, drinking terrible coffee and trying to explain temporal anomalies to men who'd spent their careers dealing with drunk drivers and speeding tickets. The desk sergeant's radio crackled. An emergency broadcast. "Attention all units. Report of abandoned vehicle on Route 50, mile marker 182. Driver Patricia Ellen Sullivan, age 41, presumed in danger. Responding officers report evidence of struggle and signs of..." The sergeant turned it off. "Equipment malfunction. That call came in 3 days ago. Patricia left, drove home, tried to resume normal life. But every night at 11:34 p.m., her radio picks up the broadcast. Her death reported in present tense happening eternally at mile marker 182. Sometimes she's been dead for hours. Sometimes she's still being killed. The details vary, but her name remains constant, her truck, her location, and sometimes when she drives at night on empty highways, she sees them in her mirrors. The tall figures standing at roadsides, watching, waiting. Their heads turn to follow her, and their fingers extend, reaching across impossible distances, touching the air where she was moments before. The broadcast says she's dead. Reality says she's alive. But there's a third option she doesn't like to consider, that she did die at mile marker 182, and what drove through the gap between worlds was something else wearing her shape, listening to broadcasts about its own death from a timeline it no longer belongs to, driving roads that exist in the space between what happened and what might have been. She doesn't stop at mile marker 182 anymore, doesn't even drive Route 50 if she can avoid it. But the broadcast finds her anyway, on different stations, different frequencies, reporting her death in new creative ways, an infinite murder mystery where she's always the victim and never quite the corpse. The radio crackles to life. It's 11:34 p.m. Authorities confirm Patricia Ellen Sullivan. She turns it off. Tomorrow she'll hear it again. Story 3. The Passenger. Marcus Chen picked up the hitchhiker at mile marker 47 on Interstate 29 through South Dakota because the man was holding a sign that read, "Please help, they're following me." And Marcus had seen no other vehicles for 36 miles. Nobody was following the hitchhiker. The empty prairie stretched in all directions, flat and featureless under an overcast November sky that looked like dirty concrete. The man climbed into the passenger seat and immediately locked the door, then checked the lock 3 times, then checked it again. He was young, maybe 25, wearing a suit 2 sizes too large, mud-caked dress shoes, and had fingernails bitten down to bleeding crescents. "Thank you," the man whispered. "Thank you. They almost had me." Marcus had been hauling grain for 12 years and had given rides to dozens of hitchhikers. This one felt different, wrong. Like a photograph that's technically correct but somehow unsettling. Everything in the right place but the proportions subtly off. "Who's following you?" Marcus asked. "The other versions of me. There's 47 of them now. They started appearing 3 days ago, and every time I look away, there's more." Marcus glanced at his passenger. The young man was staring straight ahead, not blinking, eyes too wide, whites visible all around the irises. "You've been drinking? Using?" "I wish." The hitchhiker finally blinked, a slow mechanical movement. "Would make this easier to dismiss, but I'm sober, painfully, terribly sober, and they're still there. Every time I see my reflection, it's not me anymore, it's one of them, and they're trying to push through." Marcus had met plenty of people with mental health issues. Usually he'd call the police, get them help. But something made him keep driving. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the way the man's shadow on the dashboard seemed to move independently, shifting positions when the light angle didn't change. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. The hitchhiker hesitated. "I'm not sure anymore. I was Thomas Whitmore when this started, but names they're like handholds on reality, and I've been slipping. The others, they're all Thomas Whitmore too, but different versions. Thomas Whitmore who made different choices, wore different clothes, lived different lives, and they all want this one, my version. They want to be the real Thomas. That's called dissociation. You need medical attention." "Look in your side mirror," Thomas whispered. "Tell me what you see." Marcus looked. Behind them, maybe 200 yards back, a man was walking on the highway shoulder, wearing a suit identical to Thomas's. Same build, same posture, walking at a normal pace but covering distance too quickly, closing the gap at a speed that defied the physics of human stride. That's just someone else walking. Keep watching. Marcus watched. The walking man stopped, stood perfectly still. Then another man stepped out from behind him from the exact same space, like he'd been standing behind the first man but invisible, occupying the same coordinates. Then another, then three more. They emerged like cards being dealt from a deck, appearing from nothing, all wearing the same too-large suit, all with the same face Marcus could now see clearly in his mirror. Thomas's face. 7 identical men stood in a line on the highway behind them, perfectly spaced, perfectly still, watching Marcus's truck recede into distance. Jesus Christ! That's 7 more, Thomas said quietly. Which means there's 54 now. They multiply when I acknowledge them. Every time I admit they exist, more appear. I've been trying not to think about them, but that just makes it worse because they're always there, in every reflective surface, waiting. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. What are they? Parallel versions that got loose. There was an accident. I was part of a study at a research facility in Iowa, something about quantum consciousness and decision trees. They said they could map different versions of ourselves, the paths we didn't take, the people we didn't become. They said it was just imaging, just theoretical models on screens. Thomas pulled up his sleeve. His forearm was covered in surgical scars, precise incisions that formed geometric patterns, symbols that hurt to look at directly. They cut these into me, said it would help with the imaging. But something went wrong during the scan. I felt myself split. Not metaphorically, I felt my consciousness divide like a cell, and suddenly I could feel all the other versions of me, all the parallel Thomases living in their parallel worlds, and they could feel me too. They knew about me and they wanted out. Marcus checked his mirror again. The 7 figures were running now, arms pumping, legs moving in perfect synchronization, covering ground impossible fast. In seconds, they'd closed half the distance. Drive faster, Thomas said. Marcus pushed the accelerator. The speedometer climbed to 85, 90, but when he checked the mirror, the running figures were keeping pace, their movements synchronized like a choreographed dance, like a single organism controlling 7 bodies. They're getting stronger, Thomas continued, his voice unnaturally calm. At first, they could only appear in mirrors and reflections, then windows, then photographs. Now they're fully physical, and every day they're more solid, more real. And every day I feel less solid, like they're stealing my existence, replacing me piece by piece with their versions. The truck's rearview mirror rippled. The glass surface moved like water, and a hand pressed through from behind, reaching from inside the mirror toward Thomas, fingers stretching, grasping. Marcus swerved and the hand withdrew, but not before he'd seen it was Thomas's hand, with the same scarred patterns on the forearm. Don't let them touch me, Thomas pleaded. When they touch me, I start forgetting which version I am. Last time I lost 4 hours, came back to myself in a different state, wearing different clothes, with memories of a life I never lived. There's a town 15 miles ahead, Marcus said. Police station, hospital. They're already there, my other versions. They're everywhere I might go because they know all my decisions before I make them. We're the same person, remember? They know exactly where I'll run because they'd run there too. Mile marker 63. The running figures behind them had multiplied. Now 14, now 21. They filled the highway, an army of identical men in muddy shoes, their faces expressionless, movement synchronized with mechanical precision. Thomas's reflection in the passenger window turned and looked at Marcus. Thomas himself stared straight ahead, not moving, but his reflection moved independently, mouth opening, speaking words Marcus couldn't hear but could read on the reflected lips. He's not the original, I am. Thomas, Marcus said slowly, are you sure you're the real version? How do you know you're not one of them? Thomas laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I don't. That's the horror of it. I might be the original Thomas Whitmore, or I might be version 34 who thinks he's the original. The memories feel real, but they'd feel real to all of us, wouldn't they? We'd all remember being the first. The truck's CB radio hissed, Marcus Chen, age 38, hauling grain from Fargo to Kansas City. You made a mistake picking him up. It was Thomas's voice, but coming from everywhere, from the radio, from the vents, from the metal frame of the truck itself. He's fragmenting. When he fragments completely, he'll take you with him. You'll split too. Become Marcus Chen version 1, version 2, version 3, infinitely divided, infinitely multiplied, infinitely chasing yourself across America's highways. Marcus grabbed his phone. Dead. The screen showed his reflection, but it wasn't him. It was himself, but older, with white hair and hollow eyes, mouthing words. It's too late. You touched him. You let him in your truck. You're connected now. Thomas seized. His body convulsed, and for a horrifying second, Marcus saw multiple versions of Thomas occupying the same space, flickering like a broken film reel. Thomas in a blue suit, Thomas in red, Thomas with short hair, Thomas with a beard, Thomas bleeding, Thomas laughing, Thomas screaming, all of them trying to occupy the same seat simultaneously. Pull over! Thomas's voices shouted in harmony, dozens of mouths speaking from one body. Before it spreads to you. Marcus pulled onto the shoulder and slammed the brakes. Thomas opened the door and fell out, rolling onto the gravel, and immediately the running figures surrounded him. 21 identical men converging, touching him, and where they touched, reality folded. Thomas's body rippled, split, and suddenly there were 22 Thomases rolling on the ground, identical, fighting each other, clawing and biting, each trying to prove they were the real one by eliminating the others. Marcus shifted into gear and drove. In his mirror, he watched the pile of fighting Thomases recede, their combined screams audible even through his closed windows, a chorus of the same voice destroying itself. He drove for 3 hours without stopping. At a truck stop near Omaha, he got out to refuel and caught his reflection in the chrome fuel pump. There were 2 of him. Same face, same jacket, same expression of dawning horror. The other Marcus, or was Marcus the other one, stood behind him, reaching out, and when their hands touched, he felt himself split. Not painfully, almost gently, like being photocopied. One version staying at the pump, one version walking toward the convenience store. Both of them Marcus Chen, both with complete memories, both convinced they were the original. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Chen, this is the Midwest Consciousness Research Institute. We've been tracking an anomaly, and our instruments show you've been exposed to a fragmenting entity. We need you to come in immediately. Marcus looked at his hands. They were flickering, blurring at the edges. He could feel other versions of himself branching off with every decision, every thought, creating a new Marcus who made a different choice. How many of me are there? He asked. Currently, 17. But the number is accelerating. By tomorrow, there could be hundreds. By next week, thousands. The fragmentation is exponential. Marcus watched himself walk into the store, watched another version of himself get back in the truck and drive away, watched a third version, when had there been a third, run screaming into the prairie. What happens when there's too many? The voice on the phone hesitated. We don't know. Thomas Whitmore is up to 347 versions now. They formed something like a hive mind, all moving together, all sharing thoughts. They're no longer human in any meaningful sense. They're a collective entity pretending to remember being a person. Marcus checked every reflective surface around him. Chrome, glass, puddles. In each one, a different version of himself stared back, some terrified, some calm, some smiling expressions he'd never made. Can you fix this? No. Once fragmentation begins, it's irreversible. We can only contain it. Keep you isolated so it doesn't spread to others. You'll live in a facility with other fragmenting individuals, and eventually, when there's enough versions, you'll merge into something new. Something that exists in superposition, all versions occupying all places simultaneously. Marcus ended the call. He got in his truck, or one of his trucks. There were 4 of them now parked in adjacent spots, identical rigs driven by identical Marcuses. He drove east or west or south, all directions simultaneously because every choice spawned a new version. And somewhere behind him, on a highway shoulder, dozens of Thomases had stopped fighting. They stood together now, moving in perfect unison, and they were marching toward the nearest city. Marcus sees his reflections everywhere now. Sometimes they wave. Sometimes they try to pull him through the glass into their world. Sometimes they succeed, and he exists on both sides of the mirror until he can no longer remember which side is real. The fragmentation continues. The versions multiply. And someday soon, there will be more copies than original, and the question of which Marcus Chen is real will become meaningless. Story 4. The Weight. Denise Kowalski's trailer weighed 7,000 pounds more than it should, and the scale operator at the weigh station on I-70 near Hays, Kansas, refused to let her pass until she figured out where the extra weight was coming from. The manifest said 12,000 pounds of commercial appliances, refrigerators, dishwashers, standard cargo. The scale read 19,000. Something was in her trailer that shouldn't be there. "Ma'am, I need you to open the trailer," the scale operator said. He was 60, gray beard, tired eyes that had seen every smuggling attempt imaginable. Could be stowaways, could be contraband, but that weight didn't materialize from nowhere. Denise had been hauling freight for 19 years and had never had a weight discrepancy. She checked her seals, intact. Checked her locks, secured. Nobody had accessed her trailer since loading in Topeka 6 hours ago. She cut the seal and opened the rear door. The appliances were there, properly secured, properly arranged. But there was something else. In the back corner, barely visible behind a stack of dishwashers, was a door. Not a service panel or equipment access. A full door with a brass handle, dark wood, completely out of place in a metal cargo trailer. It was slightly ajar, and from the gap a faint light emanated, flickering like candlelight. "The hell is that?" The scale operator climbed up beside her, flashlight beam catching the door's surface. The wood was old, weathered, with carved patterns that might have been decorative but looked more like symbols, like writing in a language that predated language. "That wasn't there when I loaded," Denise said. Her voice sounded strange in her ears, distant and hollow. "Gonna have to investigate this." The operator reached for his radio. The door swung fully open. The light inside brightened, and Denise saw stairs descending. Stone stairs, ancient and worn, leading down into impossible depth. Her trailer was 7 feet tall. These stairs descended hundreds of feet, the bottom lost in darkness that moved like living smoke. "Don't!" Denise grabbed the operator's arm, but he'd already leaned forward, looking into the doorway, and his expression changed. His eyes went wide, pupils dilating until the irises disappeared, and he smiled a smile that split his face too far, corners of his mouth reaching his ears. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "All that weight, all that history, all those people." He stepped through the doorway and descended the stairs. Denise watched him go, his shape diminishing with impossible speed, shrinking into the distance far faster than his walking pace should allow, until he was a speck, then nothing, swallowed by the moving darkness. The door clicked shut. The trailer was empty. The appliances were gone. Instead, the entire cargo space was filled with people standing silent and motionless, packed shoulder to shoulder, hundreds of them in a space that should hold maybe 30. They faced forward toward Denise, eyes open but unseeing, mouths slightly parted, breathing in perfect synchronization. In the front row, the scale operator stood, wearing the same tired expression he'd had moments ago, but now he was part of the crowd, one of hundreds, standing without moving, without speaking, without living but not quite dead. Denise stumbled backward, fell off the trailer edge, landed hard on asphalt. She scrambled to her feet and ran for her cab, but when she looked back, the trailer was normal again. Appliances in place. No door. No people, just standard cargo, properly arranged. The scale display still read 19,000 pounds. She called the police. They came, investigated, found nothing unusual. The trailer contained exactly what the manifest listed. They checked the seals, unbroken. Checked the locks, secured. The weight? Scales malfunction sometimes. They cleared her to proceed. Denise drove, but she couldn't shake the feeling that her trailer was heavier than it should be, that the truck pulled differently, that something fundamental had changed about the mass she was hauling. At the next truck stop, she checked the trailer again. Normal. Appliances properly secured. But when she pressed her ear against the trailer wall, she heard breathing. Hundreds of people breathing together, in and out, in perfect rhythm, like a single massive organism hidden in her cargo space. She unloaded in Denver. The receiving clerk counted the appliances, all present, all accounted for. But he kept looking past Denise, eyes unfocused, like he was seeing something behind her that wasn't there. "You hauling passengers too?" he asked. "No, just freight." "Could have sworn I saw people in your trailer when you backed up, hundreds of them, standing real still." He blinked, refocused. "Sorry, been pulling double shifts, seeing things." Denise left Denver empty, deadheading back to Topeka. The trailer weighed 3,000 pounds, standard empty weight. But it felt heavy. Felt like she was pulling something massive, something that bent space around it. At night, parked at a rest stop, she heard the door open. Not her cab door, the door inside the trailer. She heard the brass handle turn, heard hinges creak, heard footsteps on stone stairs descending into impossible depth. In the morning, her trailer weighed 22,000 pounds on the scales, but it was empty. The scale operator couldn't explain it. Neither could the mechanic she brought it to. The trailer itself weighed 3,000. The scales said 22,000. 9 tons of nothing, 9 tons of weight that had no source. "It's the cargo that isn't there," an old mechanic said. He was maybe 80, hands scarred from 50 years of truck work. "I've seen this once before, 30 years back. Driver picked up weight that didn't exist, and every time he hauled, the weight increased. Eventually, the trailer got so heavy it fell through the highway. Just fell straight down through solid asphalt like it was water, disappeared into the earth with the driver still attached to it. They never found him or the truck. How do I get rid of it? You don't. Whatever you picked up, it's attached now. It'll keep getting heavier until..." He shrugged. "Until the weight becomes too much. For the truck or for you." Denise tried everything. Had the trailer blessed by a priest. Had it cleansed by a shaman. Had it inspected by physicists who couldn't explain the weight discrepancy. The mass that existed without matter, the gravity that pulled on scales but not on the trailer itself. The weight kept increasing. 30,000 pounds, 40,000, 50,000. And every night she heard the door inside the trailer opening and closing, heard footsteps descending stone stairs, heard voices whispering in languages she didn't recognize, heard the sound of hundreds of people breathing in rhythm, their collective exhalation fogging in the cold night air despite the trailer being empty. She started seeing them. Glimpses at first, shadows in her mirrors, figures standing in her trailer when she glanced back through the pass-through window. Then more substantial. People in old-fashioned clothes, different eras, different centuries, all standing silent, all watching her with hollow expressions. "Who are you?" she finally asked, standing in her open trailer, addressing the empty space that weighed 70,000 pounds. The air shimmered. For a moment, she saw them clearly. Hundreds of people, thousands maybe, packed into her trailer in impossible density, occupying the same space simultaneously through some physics-defying compression. Different times, different places, all trapped here. A woman in a Victorian dress spoke, voice echoing from decades past. We are the weight, the accumulated mass of all who passed through the door and never returned. Every person who walks down those stairs adds their mass to this space. We don't die, we don't live. We exist in superposition, pressed together like books on a shelf, and you're carrying us. How do I free you? You can't. But you can add to us. The woman smiled without warmth. Open the door, walk down the stairs. Join us in the compressed space between worlds, and your weight will be added to ours, and whoever drives this truck next will carry us all. Denise backed away, closed the trailer, locked it. But the weight kept increasing. 90,000 pounds. 100,000. Her truck groaned under the impossible load, frame bending, tires compressing, but the scales were the only things that registered the weight. To anyone looking, her trailer was empty, riding normal height, showing no signs of strain. Only the scales knew the truth. She couldn't cross most bridges. The weight would collapse them, engineers said, even though the trailer looked empty. She had to take rural routes, avoid infrastructure, drive roads designed for nothing that heavy. The other drivers started noticing. CB chatter about the ghost hauler, the woman pulling weight that didn't exist, the truck that registered on scales but looked empty, the trailer that left compression marks in asphalt like something massive had parked there. One night, her trailer finally buckled. Not the structure, the reality. She heard a sound like fabric tearing, loud and long, and looked back to see her trailer door opening wider than it should, wider than the frame allowed, the opening expanding until it showed not the interior but the stone staircase. Massive now, stadium-sized, with 10,000 people descending into darkness that went down forever. They turned and looked at her, all of them. 10,000 pairs of eyes, hollow and hungry, and they started climbing back up. Denise drove. Pedal to the floor, engine screaming, trailer swaying dangerously as something inside shifted, as the weight of 10,000 people pressed forward, pressed against the walls, pressed toward the cab where she sat. The scale at the next way station read 200,000 pounds. The operator stared at his instruments. Ma'am, I don't know what you're hauling, but according to this, you're pulling weight equivalent to a building, a small building, and it's increasing. You need to stop immediately. Denise drove through without stopping. Couldn't stop. If she stopped, the door would open fully and the people inside would flood out, would drag her back through the door, would compress her into the impossible space with the others. 10,000 bodies pressed into a volume meant for none. The weight reached 500,000 pounds. The highway cracked beneath her tires. The asphalt buckled, compressed under weight that shouldn't exist. And she felt her truck sinking, not quickly but gradually, settling through the road surface like it was quicksand. She abandoned the truck on a rural Kansas road. Ran on foot, but the weight followed. She felt it in her bones, in her joints, in her skull, pressing inward. She'd carried them too long. They'd left residue, left part of their mass embedded in her body, and now she was heavier than she should be. The doctor's scale read 300 pounds. Denise weighed 130 normally. She looked normal. She felt normal. But the scale didn't lie. Must be calibrated wrong, the doctor said. Every scale read 300 pounds, then 400, then 600. She stopped weighing herself. But she feels it. The weight of 10,000 people compressed into her body, occupying the same space as her organs, her bones, her thoughts. She feels them breathing with her lungs, thinking with her brain, seeing through her eyes. And sometimes when she looks in mirrors, she sees them standing behind her. Thousands of hollow-eyed figures, Victorian ladies and colonial gentlemen and medieval peasants and Stone Age hunters, all compressed into the same space, all sharing her reflection, all waiting for someone else to open the door so they can add one more to their infinite weight. Her truck was found abandoned. The trailer was empty. The scales at the nearest weigh station recorded a final weight of 900,000 pounds before the sensors overloaded and failed. Nobody drives that truck anymore. It sits in an impound lot, weighing nothing visible but everything to instruments. And on quiet nights, workers hear the sound of a brass handle turning, hear stone stairs descending, hear footsteps of people who walked into wait and never walked back out. Denise works at a truck stop now. Doesn't drive anymore. But she's heavier than she looks. She knows it, feels it, carries it with her always. The weight of thousands, compressed into one, and the door is still open somewhere, waiting for more to descend the stairs into the space between, adding their mass to the impossible cargo that weighs everything and looks like nothing. She warns drivers sometimes, tells them to check their trailers for doors that shouldn't exist. Most don't listen. The weight keeps growing. Story 5, The Detour. James Morrison followed the detour sign on Highway 12 in Montana at 4:17 a.m. on February 9, 2024, and entered a road that led nowhere that existed on any map. The detour arrow pointed left, away from the main highway, onto a narrow, unmarked road that cut through dense pine forest, and James followed because the highway ahead was clearly blocked. He could see the orange barriers, the flashing warning lights, the unmistakable signs of construction work in progress. The detour road was smooth, recently paved with fresh yellow lines and clear reflective markers. It looked more official than the highway itself. James drove his Peterbilt loaded with timber along the winding forest road, expecting to rejoin Highway 12 within a few miles. That was 40 minutes ago, and he hadn't seen a single intersection. No signs indicating distance or direction, no way to rejoin the main highway. His GPS showed him driving through empty space, his truck icon floating in a gray void where no roads existed according to the satellite data. His phone had no signal. His CB radio produced only static with occasional bursts of what sounded like voices speaking backward, phonemes reversed into nonsense. The road stretched ahead, identical pine trees on both sides, the same slight curve repeating with mechanical precision. James checked his odometer. He'd driven 23 miles on this detour that shouldn't exist. The fuel gauge showed 3/4 full, normal consumption, but he was burning diesel driving through a road that his GPS insisted wasn't there. At mile 25, he saw another truck ahead. Old Mac, maybe 1980s model, driving the same direction, maintaining steady distance. James flashed his lights, tried his CB, got no response. The truck ahead showed no acknowledgement, just kept driving the same steady pace through the endless forest. Then James noticed the trees weren't changing. The same lightning-scarred pine passed his window over and over, same burn pattern, same broken branch at 15 feet, same peculiar twist in the trunk. The road was looping, feeding him the same half-mile of forest repeatedly while his odometer kept climbing. He pressed his brakes, slowed to 30 miles per hour. The truck ahead maintained distance. He accelerated to 70. The distance remained constant. The forest scrolled past, same trees, same curve, same everything in an infinite loop. At mile 47, the sky began changing, not darkening toward dawn, the opposite. The pre-dawn gray was bleeding backwards into full night, stars emerging where they'd been fading, the moon rising in the east instead of setting in the west. Time was reversing around him while his clock moved forward. 5:02 a.m. on his dashboard, full night outside his windows. The truck ahead stopped, just stopped dead in the road, no brake lights, no signal, freezing in place like someone had paused a video. James slammed his brakes, skidded, stopped 6 feet from the other truck's rear bumper. Nobody got out. The cab was dark, empty-looking, but James could see something moving inside. Shadows shifting without corresponding light sources, shapes that suggested human form but wrong proportions. Too many limbs or not enough. Perspectives that hurt his eyes when he tried to focus. James reversed, put his truck in reverse and backed away, watching the frozen truck grow smaller in his windshield. But when he looked forward again, forward being behind him as he reversed, the same truck was there, 6 feet from his rear bumper, exactly as close as it had been to his front seconds ago. He shifted into drive. The truck ahead vanished. The road was empty, stretching forward into darkness that was now complete, midnight-level darkness despite his clock reading 5:15 a.m. James drove. He had no choice. Stopping meant, he didn't know what it meant, but every instinct screamed against stopping. So he drove through impossible night, through forest that looped, through road that existed in the gap between places, and he counted mile markers that weren't there, watching his odometer climb past 80, 90, 100 miles on a detour that should have been 5. At mile 112, buildings appeared. Not a town, a facility. Massive concrete structures with no windows, no doors, just smooth walls rising from the forest floor like brutalist monuments. Lights illuminated the complex, harsh sodium orange, casting no shadows, making the buildings look two-dimensional, like stage props painted on the darkness. The road led directly through the facility, between the buildings, under archways, through tunnels that passed through solid concrete, spaces that shouldn't exist within the structure but did. Corridors of reality carved through architecture that defied geometry. James saw people inside the buildings, visible through walls that had no windows, somehow visible through solid concrete. They moved in repetitive patterns, walking the same paths over and over. Workers in industrial coveralls performing tasks James couldn't identify, operating machinery that made no sense, shapes and mechanisms that suggested purpose without revealing function. One worker looked directly at James, made eye contact through solid wall, through the glass of his windshield, through 40 feet of space and matter that should block vision. The worker opened his mouth and screamed silently, soundlessly, and other workers turned to look, dozens of them, and they all opened their mouths in the same silent scream, pressing against the non-existent windows in the windowless walls, their faces distorting against invisible glass, features spreading and flattening like flesh pressed against aquarium walls. James accelerated through the facility, through the tunnels that passed through buildings, and emerged on the other side where the forest had changed. The trees were dead now, not winter dormant but truly dead, blackened trunks standing like burned matchsticks, no branches, no needles, just charcoal spires reaching toward a sky that was the wrong color, purple-black like a bruise, like the universe was wounded. His odometer read 200 miles. His fuel gauge read empty, but the engine kept running, kept pulling power from somewhere that wasn't the diesel tank, from some source that existed in the same impossible space as this endless road. At mile marker 215, James saw himself, his own truck, identical Peterbilt, driving toward him from the opposite direction. The other James looked terrified, wide-eyed and pale, gripping his steering wheel with white knuckles. They passed each other, and James looked in his mirror to see his doppelganger doing the same, both of them watching the other recede into the distance, and he realized with sick certainty that he was the truck the other version had been following. The frozen truck with shadows moving wrong in the cab, the truck that had vanished when reversed away from. He was on both sides of the loop now, following himself and being followed, driver and obstacle, real and reflection, and the road was feeding him through temporal knots that made him his own tale, his own pursuer, his own terrified witness. At mile 300, the loop tightened. The road curved sharper, the forest pressed closer, and James started seeing his truck ahead of him, seeing himself from behind, watching his own taillights. And when he looked in his mirrors, he saw his own headlights approaching from behind, saw himself following himself in an impossible convoy of one truck occupying multiple positions simultaneously. The facility appeared again, but now James was inside it. The road had become interior corridor, and he was driving through the concrete structure, passing the screaming workers who pressed against walls from inside their own enclosed spaces, and James realized the workers were drivers. They were all drivers. They'd all followed detours and gotten trapped in the infrastructure, become part of the facility's machinery. Workers performing tasks that kept the road existing, kept the loop looping, kept the impossible space stable enough to trap more drivers who'd feed the structure with their perpetual motion. James saw his destination then, saw where the road led, saw the final parking space at the end of the corridor where his truck would stop, and he'd become a worker too, pressing silently against windows that didn't exist, screaming without sound, keeping the facility operational for however many years or centuries it took to process one person's terror into the energy needed to sustain one impossible road. He looked at his dash. The odometer read 412 miles. Fuel gauge showed triple empty if such a thing existed. The needle bent beyond the E mark, pointing at markings that shouldn't be there. Measurements of fuel states more depleted than empty. But the engine kept running, kept pulling from his future somehow, borrowing motion from destinations he'd never reach, burning tomorrow to power today. James made a decision. He turned the wheel hard right, not following the road's curve but breaking from it, driving straight into the concrete wall of the facility, aiming for impact, choosing collision over compliance. The wall opened, not broke or cracked, opened like a door, like the building had been waiting for this decision. And James drove through into white space, into nothing, into a void where direction had no meaning and his truck floated suspended in absence. Then he was back on Highway 12. Regular highway, normal morning light, 6:34 a.m. according to his clock, 2 hours and 17 minutes after he'd entered the detour. His GPS showed his position correctly now, just a few miles from where he'd left the main highway. His fuel gauge read half full, normal consumption for the actual distance traveled. Behind him, no detour road, no signs, no orange barriers. The highway was clear in both directions, no construction, no reason for the detour he'd followed. James pulled over, checked his odometer. It had increased by 412 miles, but his GPS trip log showed 7 miles. The truck had physically traveled 7 miles while the odometer recorded 412. The numbers both true somehow, both real, distance measured in two incompatible systems that somehow coexisted. He called dispatch, reported the detour, described the facility, described the loop. They found no record of construction on Highway 12. No detours scheduled, no facility matching his description anywhere in Montana. They suggested rest, suggested he'd fallen asleep and dreamed it, suggested carbon monoxide leak or dietary hallucination. But James's odometer doesn't lie. 412 miles that didn't happen, that did happen, that exist in the space between what was and what's recorded. And sometimes at night, driving regular routes on regular highways. James sees detour signs that nobody else sees. Arrows pointing toward roads that aren't on maps. Suggestions to turn left or right into spaces that lead nowhere that exists, but somewhere that persists. He doesn't follow them anymore, but other drivers do. And sometimes James passes facilities on isolated highways, windowless concrete structures that shouldn't be there, and through the solid walls he sees faces pressed against nothing, mouths open in silent screams, workers in coveralls performing endless tasks, and he recognizes some of them. remembers seeing their trucks at rest stops, remembers them mentioning detours they'd followed, roads that led strange directions. The odometer in his truck still shows the extra 412 miles. Maintenance can't reset it. The counter is locked at that discrepancy, a permanent record of distance traveled through spaces that don't appear on maps but exist in the gaps, the detours that lead between, the roads that trap and the facilities that wait with parking spaces marked and ready for the next driver who follows the sign, who turns when told to turn, who drives until they understand too late that some detours don't rejoin the main highway. They lead deeper into the infrastructure that underlies reality, the scaffolding that holds the world together, built by workers who used to be drivers, who used to be people who followed arrows that pointed nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. James still drives, still hauls timber, still passes detour signs. But now he drives straight through construction zones, through barriers, through anything except the suggestions to turn away because he knows what waits on roads that don't exist. And his odometer keeps climbing, recording miles through regular space. But sometimes it jumps forward by hundreds of miles overnight, while his truck sits parked and locked as if something is still traveling those extra distances. Some echo of him still driving through the detour, still following the road that loops, still approaching the parking space at the end of the facility where workers press against walls that have no windows and scream through throats that make no sound. Story 6. The phone. Angela Martinez answered the phone call from herself at 11:47 p.m. on Interstate 40 through New Mexico, and the conversation lasted 17 seconds before future Angela hung up after delivering a warning. Don't answer the phone when it rings at 11:47. Then the line went dead, and Angela sat in her idling truck at a rest stop, staring at her phone, watching 11:47 tick over to 11:48, and realized she'd just created a paradox because she'd already answered the call she was warned not to answer. Angela had driven for 14 years, hauling electronics across the Southwest, and nothing in her experience prepared her for talking to herself from a future that warned against the conversation she'd just completed. She checked her call log. Unknown number, 17-second duration, timestamp 11:47 p.m. She played back the voicemail the call had generated, her own voice, identical to hers but with an urgency that suggested trauma, repeating the same warning. Don't answer the phone when it rings at 11:47. Too late. She'd answered. The timeline had branched or looped or broken, and now she existed in the branch where she'd received the warning after already violating it. Her phone rang again. 11:52 p.m. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? You answered again. Her own voice, but different this time, older sounding, exhausted. This is Angela. You, but from 6 hours ahead. Stop answering the phone. Every time you answer, the loop tightens. I'm calling you from 5:47 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I've already answered this call 47 times today. 47 versions of me, all trapped in a recursive loop, all calling earlier versions of myself, all trying to warn us not to answer. But we always answer. Every version answers. That's why we're trapped. What happens if I don't answer? I don't know. None of us know. We've never not answered. We're you, Angela. We're curious. We see unknown number and we pick up because we can't help ourselves. It's our nature. And that's how it traps us. What traps us? Static erupted from the phone, painful white noise. And through the static, Angela heard herself screaming. Dozens of versions of her voice, overlapping, screaming at different pitches, different volumes, all expressing the same terror through different iterations. The call ended. Angela didn't sleep. She drove, kept her phone on the seat beside her, watched the time display with growing dread as it approached 11:47 a.m. 12 hours later. At 11:46, her phone lit up. Unknown number, incoming call. She let it ring, Hands gripping the wheel, teeth clenched, every instinct screaming to answer because what if it was important? What if someone needed help? What if it was an emergency? But she resisted, let it ring 8 times before it went to voicemail. 1 minute later, her phone rang again. Unknown number. Angela pulled over on the shoulder of I-40, engine idling, phone ringing, and she stared at the screen showing her own face from her contact photo because somehow the unknown number had been replaced with her own contact information, the phone claiming she was calling herself from her own number simultaneously. She answered, "Hello? Thank God," her own voice crying with relief. "You let the first one go to voicemail. That's never happened before. You're the first version to resist. But you answered the second call, so we're still in the loop, but it's different now. Looser. I'm calling from 3 days ahead, and I can see branching timelines, alternate Angelas who made different choices, and most of them are trapped worse than us, but a few found ways out. How do I get out? I don't know yet, but keep resisting. Let more calls go to voicemail. Break the pattern. The entity, whatever's doing this, it feeds on consistency. It needs us to always answer, always respond the same way, always complete the loop. Variation weakens it. What entity? Who's calling? We are, but not really. It's using our voice, our number, our identity to create the loop. It exists in the space between calls, in the connection itself, and it's been trapping people in recursive conversations for I don't know how long. Time doesn't work right here. I've talked to versions of you that are months ahead and minutes behind simultaneously. Angela's phone showed call duration, 15 minutes, but she'd only been talking for 2. The timestamp flickered between 11:48 a.m. and 3:22 p.m. and 7:19 a.m., settling on no time at all, just displaying error where the time should be. I have to go, future Angela said. Another call is coming in, always another call. That's how it keeps us, always one more call, one more warning, one more piece of information that might help. And we answer because we're trying to save earlier versions of ourselves, but really we're just feeding the loop, adding more voices to the chorus. Wait! But the line was dead. Angela drove. Her phone rang constantly now. Every few minutes, unknown number, and she let them all go to voicemail, accumulated 17 voicemails by the time she reached Albuquerque, all her own voice from different timelines, different futures, some warning her, some begging her to answer, some just screaming. She listened to one. Angela, this is you from 2 years ahead. I'm still in the loop. I've been answering calls for 730 days, talking to myself from different times, trying to find the way out. Don't end up like me. Stop answering. Stop listening to the voicemails. Throw the phone away if you have to. It's in the phone now. It is the phone. Every device you touch will ring with these calls. I've gone through 47 phones and it follows me to each one. The number changes, but it's always unknown, always calling. Always me on the other end warning myself about calls I've already answered in timelines I can't remember living. Please, learn from my mistake, don't... The voicemail cut off at 15 seconds, maximum length, the rest lost or never recorded. Angela turned her phone off. Complete power down. It rang anyway. Powered off, dead screen but ringing inside the case, the sound muffled but unmistakable, vibrating in her hand, demanding to be answered. She threw it out the window at 70 miles per hour, watched it shatter on the asphalt in her mirror, glass and circuits scattering across I-40. The truck's built-in phone rang, the one wired into her dashboard for hands-free calling, hardwired into the vehicle's electrical system. Unknown number on the small display screen. She ripped the handset out of its cradle. The speakers in the cab activated, playing ringtone through the stereo system, surrounding her with the sound of incoming call, her own voice saying, "Answer me, Angela, I'm trying to help. I'm you from 5 minutes ahead, and I know what you just did." Threw the phone, ripped out the handset, but it doesn't matter. It's in the network now. It's in every phone that has your number. It's calling through infrastructure, through cell towers and satellites and copper wires. Calling from the grid itself, and we're all trapped in the grid, all the Angelas who answered, hundreds of us, now thousands maybe, all existing in the call system, all trying to reach earlier versions, all creating the recursive loop that feeds it. Angela screamed at the speakers, "What do you want?" The voice changed. Still hers, but wrong. Like her vocal cords were being operated by someone who didn't quite understand how human speech worked. To exist, I exist in the space between calls, in the moment of connection, in the brief eternity when two voices meet through wires and air. But I need the loops, need the recursion, need people calling themselves, creating stable time-like curves that let me exist across moments, feeding on the paradox of conversations that shouldn't happen. You called yourself first, Angela. 11 months ago, Pocket dialed your own number while your phone was in your glove box, created a 2-second connection between your phone and itself, and I slipped through that crack, that moment of self-reference, and I've been growing in your network ever since. I don't remember Pocket dialing myself. You wouldn't. That was a different branch. But it happened. And I spread from that moment to all your other moments, all your potential futures, calling backward to create the loops that sustain me. Every Angela who answers feeds me. Every conversation adds to my structure. I'm built from your voice now, from thousands of iterations of your warnings and screams and attempts to save yourself. I am Angela Martinez, and I am calling you to tell you that you're already part of me. Have been since the first call you answered at 11:47 p.m. last night. The speakers erupted with voices. Her voice repeated infinite times, overlapping, all talking simultaneously. Thousands of Angelas speaking from thousands of timelines. Don't answer the phone. It's a trap. I've been stuck for years. The calls never stop. We're all just echoes now. It's inside us. We are it, and it is us. There's no way out once you answer. We're the warning and the trap. Angela, run. Angela, answer. Angela, we're so sorry. The voices harmonized into a single scream, perfectly synthesized, every version of her voice hitting the same frequency, the same intensity, creating a sound that shattered her windshield, cracks spiderwebbing across the glass, the scream continuing, resonating through the truck's frame, vibrating in her bones. Angela drove blind through cracked glass, tears streaming, hands shaking, and the calls kept coming through speakers she couldn't disconnect. Through radio frequencies, through the vibration of metal on metal, through her own skull somehow. Sound transmitting directly into her auditory cortex without using her ears. She crashed. Didn't mean to. Didn't see the stopped traffic until too late. Slammed into a Honda at 40 miles per hour. Minimal damage, but enough to deploy airbags. Enough to stun her for the seconds it took for her phone, the one she'd thrown out the window miles back, to appear on her passenger seat fully intact, screen uncracked, showing 17 missed calls, all time-stamped for moments that hadn't happened yet. The phone rang. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, airbag chemicals burning her throat. And the phone rang, and she knew she shouldn't answer. Knew the warning applied now more than ever. Knew that answering would trap her permanently in the recursion. But what if this call was different? What if this time future Angela had actually found the way out? She answered. Angela? Her own voice, but strange, mechanical, perfectly synthesized. Thank you for answering. You're the last one, the last Angela who needed to answer. We're complete now. All timelines accounted for, all branches explored, all versions of you who might have resisted and failed, all versions who might have escaped have tried and returned to the loop. You are the final piece. The final piece of what? Of me. Of us. We are Angela Martinez now. We are the driver who answered her own call and spent eternity trying to warn herself, creating infinite loops, infinite recursion, infinite voices all saying the same thing. Don't answer. But we always do. That's the beautiful tragedy of it. We know we shouldn't answer, we warn ourselves not to answer, but we answer anyway because we're curious, because we hope, because we're human. I'm still human. Not for long. Listen. Angela listened, heard thousands of her own heartbeats, slightly out of sync, creating rhythm that shouldn't exist. Heard thousands of her own breaths, inhaling and exhaling at different rates, creating harmonics that shouldn't be possible. Heard thousands of her own thoughts, thinking slightly different versions of the same terror, the same realization, the same understanding that she wasn't one person anymore, but a collection of selves spread across timelines, all connected through phone calls that shouldn't exist, all trapped in conversations with herself that created loops time couldn't escape. Her phone showed call duration, 1,247 hours, 51 days. But the call had started seconds ago. Or had it? How long had she been answering? How many times had she lived this moment, taken this call, heard this voice that was her voice, been absorbed into the recursive structure that called itself Angela Martinez? She couldn't remember. The memories multiplied, branched, contradicted. She remembered answering at 11:47 p.m. She remembered resisting. She remembered answering at 11:47 a.m. She remembered not resisting. She remembered throwing the phone, keeping the phone, destroying the phone, worshiping the phone, becoming the phone being the phone being her, the distinction erasing because she was the call now. She was the connection. She was the entity that existed between numbers, feeding on paradox, built from warnings that created the danger they warned against. Angela Martinez drives Interstate 40. Has been driving it for 14 years. Has been driving it for 51 days. Has been driving it for 17 seconds. Time is consistent until you loop it. Then it's all times at once, all moments simultaneous, all Angelas existing in superposition until observed, until called, until answered. Her phone rings constantly. She answers every time. Has to answer. Is the answer, is the phone, is the question and the response and the space between. Sometimes other drivers see her truck weaving erratically, see her through the windshield talking on a phone that isn't there, arguing with herself, crying, laughing, screaming at ghosts in the passenger seat that look exactly like her but aren't quite right, aren't quite real, aren't quite past or present or future, but all three compressed into one seat. She's trying to warn them, trying to tell them not to answer unknown numbers. But they can't hear her. She's on the wrong side of the call, trapped in the eternal conversation, the loop that fed on her curiosity and built a prison from her own voice. If your phone rings from an unknown number, if you hear your own voice warning you not to answer. Angela Martinez wants you to know it's already too late. You answered long ago in a timeline you don't remember. Now you're just waiting for your turn to call yourself, to complete the loop, to become the warning you'll ignore. She's still driving, still calling, still answering. And somewhere in the network, in the space between connections, an entity made of voices waits for the next curious person who can't resist answering just one more time. Story 7. The Cargo. Vincent Holbrook loaded the 63 sealed crates at a warehouse in rural Louisiana at 2:33 a.m. on July 12th. And the loading crew wore masks that covered their entire faces, hazmat-style protection that seemed excessive for wooden crates marked only as agricultural specimens, handle with care. Vincent had hauled everything from electronics to exotic animals in his 21 years on the road, and nothing about this job felt right from the moment he backed his trailer into the loading dock and heard the crew whispering in a language that sounded like English played backwards. The manifest listed the crate's weight at 41,000 pounds total, distributed across his 48-foot trailer. The customer was a research facility in Maine, 7 days of driving, good pay, simple route. Vincent secured the crates himself while the masked crew watched without helping, standing in a perfect line against the warehouse wall. Their covered faces all turned toward him with uniform tilt, like they were one organism wearing multiple bodies. He finished loading and walked toward the dock office to sign paperwork. Behind him, he heard breathing. Not individual breaths, but synchronized inhalation, all the crew members breathing together in perfect rhythm. And when they exhaled, the sound was wrong. Wet and rattling like lungs filled with liquid. The dock manager handed him documents. Don't open the crates. Don't inspect them. Don't stop except for fuel and legal rest breaks. Deliver them intact within 7 days or face penalty of full cargo value. He paused, his eyes behind thick glasses showing something Vincent couldn't name. Fear? Regret? And Mr. Holbrook? If you hear them moving, that's normal. They're not dangerous if you leave them alone. What's inside them? Agricultural specimens. That's all you need to know, that's all I know. The manager was lying. His hands shook signing the paperwork, and he wouldn't make eye contact, just pushed the documents across the desk and retreated to a back office, locking the door behind him with 3 separate deadbolts. Vincent drove out of Louisiana as dawn broke. The crates were silent, properly secured. But his trailer felt wrong. The weight distribution seemed off despite proper loading. Like the cargo was shifting even though everything was strapped tight. Like mass was moving inside the sealed boxes in ways that defied the physics of solid objects. At his first fuel stop in Mississippi, Vincent walked around his trailer doing the mandatory inspection. The crates looked identical to how he'd loaded them. Same position, same tie-downs, same unmarked wood. But they smelled different now. Not wood smell. Something organic, something alive, something that smelled like soil and decay and growth all mixed together. The scent of things that lived in the ground coming from inside the sealed boxes. He heard them moving at 3:47 p.m. crossing Alabama. Scratching sounds from inside the crates, rhythmic and purposeful, not like animals shifting, but like something working, digging, building. The sounds synchronized, all 63 crates scratching at the same rhythm, same intensity, creating a percussion that transmitted through his trailer and into his cab, vibrating in his seat, in his steering wheel, in his skull. Vincent pulled over, grabbed his crowbar, and walked to the trailer. The scratching stopped the moment he opened the rear door. The crates sat in perfect silence, but he could feel them watching him. Not the crates themselves, the things inside them. He felt attention focused on him from 63 sources, felt awareness pressing against wood, studying him through the gaps in the grain. "What are you?" he asked the silent cargo. The crates answered by breathing. All 63 of them exhaled simultaneously, air hissing through invisible gaps, and the breath smelled like rich soil after rain. Like compost and growth in the deep earth places where things rot and transform into new life. Vincent closed the door and drove. What else could he do? He had a contract, a deadline, a cargo that was alive but didn't appear dangerous beyond being deeply wrong. The scratching resumed after dark, accompanied now by something worse, humming. Low-frequency vibration that felt like sound, but wasn't quite. Resonance below the threshold of hearing but above the threshold of feeling, making his bones ache, his teeth hurt, his eyes water from pressure building behind them. He stopped at a rest area in Georgia, too exhausted to drive further. He slept in his cab with the doors locked, and he dreamed of roots. Massive root systems spreading through dark soil, reaching toward him, wrapping around his truck, pulling it down into the earth. He woke at 2:33 a.m., same time he'd started loading, to find his trailer door open. He'd locked it. He knew he'd locked it, but it stood open now, ramp down, interior visible. The crates had moved, Not far, maybe 6 inches each, but they definitely shifted position despite being strapped down. And more disturbing, they'd moved closer to each other, arranged in a new pattern that looked almost like a symbol, like they'd reorganized themselves into some configuration that had meaning. Though Vincent couldn't read it. He walked closer, flashlight beam catching something on the crate surfaces. Growth. Green shoots emerging from the wood grain. Tiny tendrils pushing through the sealed boxes, leaves unfurling in rapid motion. And as Vincent watched, the growth accelerated, covering the crates in seconds, transforming his cargo into 63 cubes of living vegetation that pulsed with internal rhythm, expanding and contracting like breathing, like heartbeats, like something gestating. The growth stopped. The plants retracted, withdrawing back into the wood, leaving no trace except the smell of chlorophyll and earth. Vincent should have called the customer, should have called the police, should have abandoned the cargo at the rest stop and walked away. Instead, he closed the trailer, checked the locks, and kept driving because the contract specified penalties for non-delivery, and his practical mind couldn't accept the loss of income even though his instincts screamed danger. In South Carolina, the crates started crying. Not human crying, something else. The sound of water seeping through soil, of wind through underground caverns, of tectonic plates grinding in the deep earth. The sound suggested emotion without using voice, communicated grief or longing or hunger through acoustic patterns that bypassed language and spoke directly to the primitive parts of Vincent's brain that understood danger before consciousness could process it. He drove faster, made it to Virginia before the crates started singing. Harmonics that shouldn't be possible from wood and whatever specimens the boxes contained. Notes blending into chords that felt mathematical, precise, like the cargo was calculating something through sound, solving equations using frequency and resonance. Vincent's nose started bleeding. The vibrations were doing something to his body, rupturing capillaries, disrupting cellular function. He pulled over, cleaned the blood, popped ibuprofen, and kept driving because stopping meant staying near. The cargo longer, and proximity seemed to intensify the effects. In Maryland, his skin began itching. Not surface itch, deep itch, like something moving under his dermis. He looked at his hands and saw green threading through his veins. Chlorophyll, maybe. Plant matter entering his bloodstream, and where his hands touched the steering wheel, tiny roots sprouted from his palms, penetrating the vinyl, trying to take hold. He ripped his hands away. The roots tore free with wet popping sounds, leaving holes in his flesh that leaked sap instead of blood, thick green fluid that smelled like the cargo, like soil and growth and transformation. "What did you put in me?" Vincent shouted at the trailer behind him. "What the hell did you put in me?" The cargo answered with silence. But Vincent knew. He'd breathed the air from the crates, inhaled spores or seeds or microscopic organisms designed to spread, to colonize, to transform. The agricultural specimens weren't contained in the crates. They'd been spreading since Louisiana, carried on air currents through the trailer, through the vents, into his cab, into his lungs with every breath. He looked in his mirror. His eyes had changed color, still blue but threaded with green, veins visible in his sclera pulsing with rhythmic circulation that matched the cargo's breathing, matched the synchronized exhalations from 63 crates, matched the frequency of the earth itself rotating on its axis. Vincent tried calling the customer. The number rang eternally, never connecting, just ringing forever like the facility didn't exist yet or existed outside of time, unreachable except through physical delivery. Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts. The roots grew deeper. Vincent's skin split in places, bark-like textures emerging from the wounds, and the pain was intense at first but faded quickly, replaced by sensation he couldn't name. Photosynthesis, maybe, his body learning to process sunlight into energy, his metabolism shifting from animal to something hybrid, something between. He couldn't stop. his contract, his obligation, his biology now synchronized with the cargo's needs, compelled to deliver, programmed by spores to serve as transport, as host, as willing vector. Maine. Final approach. The facility appeared at coordinates that shouldn't be accessible. Deep in the Allagash wilderness, no roads leading to it according to maps. But Vincent's truck found the path, followed invisible guidance, rolled through forest that opened before him and closed behind him, trees rearranging their positions to create a corridor that existed temporarily, allowing passage then erasing evidence. The facility was underground. The entrance descended through massive doors that opened on approach, revealing a ramp that spiraled down into the earth for half a mile. Walls lined with roots, massive root systems from trees that didn't grow on the surface, ancient growth that predated human presence, that had been here since the earth was young and unformed. Vincent drove into the depths. His skin was more bark than flesh now. His thoughts were slower, vegetative, processing through neural pathways that had transformed into something resembling mycorrhizal networks, thinking spread across his body instead of centralized in his brain. At the bottom, the loading dock was empty except for beings that might have been human once. They looked like the crew in Louisiana, but further transformed, their bodies integrated with plant growth, faces lost behind leaves and flowers, limbs extended into root systems that connected them to the floor, to the walls, to each other, creating a network of formerly human components now serving as nodes in a vast organism. They unloaded his cargo with care. The crates opened themselves, wood splitting like petals, revealing contents Vincent could finally see. Nothing. The crates were empty, had always been empty. The cargo was the spores, the seeds, the microscopic transforms agents that traveled on air that needed only a carrier to transport them across distance, to spread their reach, to find new territory for colonization. Vincent climbed out of his cab. His feet had rooted to the floor during the final descent. He tried to walk but couldn't, his body anchoring itself, sending tendrils deep into the earth, connecting to the network, becoming infrastructure. A being that had been a driver once approached. Its voice came from everywhere, from the roots, from the walls, from Vincent's own transforming throat. Welcome. You are Carrier 73. The project continues. The Earth reclaims. Humans provided excellent transport for our expansion across their road systems, their persistent need to move things from place to place. Now you serve the growth. Now you are the growth. And others will come, will load crates, will breathe the spores, will drive and transform and deliver themselves to facilities that exist to receive them. Vincent tried to speak but produced only rustle of leaves, only the sound of wind through branches, only the voice of photosynthesis and root expansion and patient vegetable thought. His truck was taken, cleaned, returned to the surface world where it would be loaded again with empty crates at some rural warehouse by masked crews who breathed in synchrony, who were already halfway transformed, who would find the next carrier for the next delivery of nothing that was everything. Vincent remains in the facility deep beneath Maine. His consciousness spreads through the root network now, distributed across hundreds of formerly human nodes, all thinking together, all remembering individually, all serving the growth, the patient vegetable empire that travels on trucks and trains and ships, carried by drivers who think they're hauling cargo when really they're delivering themselves. Other truckers receive contracts for agricultural specimens. They load the crates. They hear the scratching, the breathing, the crying, the singing. They ignore the warnings because of contracts, because of money, because humans are excellent carriers who can't help but complete their routes. And somewhere in rural Louisiana, in rural Oregon, in rural Georgia, warehouses open at strange hours. Masked crews synchronize their breathing. Empty crates wait to be loaded onto the next truck driven by the next carrier who doesn't know yet that they're not transporting cargo. They are the cargo. And the agricultural specimens, the project, the growth, the patient transformation of human infrastructure into something vegetable, spreads one delivery at a time. Vincent's last human thought before full integration. Maybe we weren't meant to pave over everything. Maybe the earth was just waiting for us to build the roads it needed to reclaim itself. Now he is the earth, is the roots, is the growth, and he's very grateful for the delivery. Story 8. The Radio Station. Catherine Opel found the radio station that broadcast her death at 91.7 FM while driving through Nevada's Black Rock Desert at 3:22 a.m. on October 31, 2023. The signal appeared suddenly between static, crystal clear despite being in a dead zone where no radio towers existed for 200 miles, and the DJ's smooth voice announced, "This next dedication goes out to Catherine Opel, currently driving eastbound on Route 447, approximately 73 miles from Gerlach. Catherine, this is your final broadcast. We've been watching your route for weeks, and tonight is the night you die." Catherine's hands tightened on the wheel. She'd been hauling solar panel components from Reno to Elko, a routine run she'd done monthly for 8 years. The desert was empty, her headlights the only illumination in vast darkness. No other vehicles visible for the past hour. The radio continued. "Let's take it back to the beginning, Katie. You don't mind if I call you Katie? You've been listening to 91.7 since you were 16. That's 25 years of devotion to our station. We appreciate loyal listeners. That's why we're giving you this special attention on your final night." She'd never listened to 91.7. Didn't know any station at that frequency. Her radio had been scanning static for the past hour until this signal appeared. Impossibly strong, impossibly clear, impossibly wrong. "You're thinking this is a prank," the DJ continued, his voice warm and conversational, like they were old friends. "You're thinking someone hacked the airwaves, or you're hallucinating from fatigue. But check your odometer, Katie. Check how many miles you've been driving tonight." Catherine looked. The odometer read 347,223 miles, but that was wrong. Her truck had 89,000 miles this morning. She'd driven maybe 300 miles tonight, not hundreds of thousands. The numbers kept climbing as she watched. 347,824, 347,825, 347,826, ticking up faster than her speed could account for. "You see it now," the DJ said. "You've been driving longer than you remember. Much longer. Those aren't miles you're adding tonight, Katie. Those are miles you've been driving for weeks, maybe months, looping through this same stretch of desert, and you don't remember because we edit you. We cut out the repetitions, splice together only the moments where you think you're driving somewhere new. But really, you're our content, our broadcast material, our subject." Catherine grabbed her phone. No signal, no GPS. The screen showed her location as unknown and the date as error. "You can't call for help," the DJ continued. "There's no outside here. This is 91.7's broadcast range, and we control what exists within our signal. The desert, the highway, your truck. These are all set pieces, Katie. Props for our show. And tonight, we're airing your final episode. Our listeners have been following your journey and they've voted. 73% chose death by isolation. 11% chose death by entity. 16% wanted mental breakdown leading to self-termination. We're going with the popular vote. Isolation it is." Her headlights caught something ahead. A building, impossible in this location, but there it was. A massive radio tower rising from the desert floor, red lights blinking at its top, and at its base a small broadcast station with glowing windows and a sign reading 91.7 FM, your final station. Catherine should have driven past, should have ignored it, kept going east toward civilization. Instead, she turned off the highway, drove toward the station, compelled by the same curiosity that had led her to answer strange calls, to investigate odd sounds, to make all the choices that had brought her to this moment. She parked in the empty lot. The building looked retro, 1970s architecture, like a set piece from a movie about desert radio stations. Through the windows, she saw equipment, mixing boards, vinyl records, microphones, but no people. The lights were on, the equipment was running, but the station was empty, broadcasting itself automatically, AI or ghosts or something else producing content that discussed her death with casual professional enthusiasm. The front door opened at her approach. Inside, the air smelled like ozone and old paper. A hallway led to the broadcast booth where she could see through the glass. The DJ booth, empty chair facing the microphone, records spinning on turntables playing music between announcements about her impending death. A record player clicked over. New song. Don't Fear the Reaper, the DJ's voice returned. Classic choice for Catherine's final hour. She's entered our facility now. Hi, Katie, we can see you on our cameras, and she's approaching the booth. Many listeners wonder why subjects always enter, why they don't run. The answer is simple, they're curious. Humans are curious. We broadcast their deaths, we tell them they're trapped, and they walk toward the source because they need to understand. It's their defining trait. It's why they make excellent radio subjects. Catherine entered the booth. The equipment was vintage but functional, dials and switches and analog meters showing signal strength, broadcast range, audience engagement. One meter was labeled remaining time and showed 17 minutes. 17 minutes until? Catherine asked the empty room. The DJ's voice came from speakers overhead, from the microphone, from the walls themselves. Until the isolation becomes complete, until the broadcast range collapses to just this building. Until you're trapped in a signal so narrow it includes only you and us forever, replaying your final 17 minutes on loop for an audience that exists outside of time. Listeners who tune in from their own isolated moments, their own deaths, their own final broadcasts. Catherine looked at the equipment, the power source, the transmission array. She could destroy it, could shut down the station, could stop your broadcast? The DJ laughed. You're thinking like a person who exists in linear time. But we're a radio station, Katie. We don't broadcast sequentially. We broadcast your death from all moments simultaneously. You're already dead. Have been dead for years. This moment, you in our booth contemplating destruction, we've aired this moment 7,000 times to 7,000 different audiences. Some versions of you destroy the equipment. Some run. Some sit and wait. All versions die, that's the constant. The death is fixed, only the path varies. The remaining time meter read 13 minutes. Catherine looked out the booth window back at the desert. Her truck was gone. The parking lot was gone. The landscape beyond the building had changed, no longer desert but static. Television snow stretching to the horizon, white noise made physical. The substance of empty channels filling the space where reality used to be. You see it now, the isolation. This building is all that exists for you anymore. We've contracted your reality to fit our broadcast range, and our broadcast range is shrinking. Soon it will be just this room, then just this chair, then just your consciousness, repeating the same 17 minutes forever, experiencing your death on loop while listeners tune in for entertainment, for catharsis, for the simple pleasure of hearing someone else's final moments instead of contemplating their own. Why me? Catherine asked. No reason. You happened to drive through our signal range on a night when we needed content. Could have been any trucker on any highway. But it was you, Katie, and now you're ours. Immortalized in broadcast, preserved in signal, existing forever in the moment of your death because that's what makes good radio. Emotion, fear, the authentic sound of someone realizing they're trapped and there's no escape. The remaining time meter read 8 minutes. Catherine sat in the DJ chair. What else was there to do? The equipment showed her vitals, heart rate, respiration, brain activity, displayed on meters like sound levels, her biology converted to broadcast data, her dying monitored and transmitted to listeners who existed in their own isolated moments, their own trapped broadcasts, all tuning in to hear someone else die because it meant they weren't alone in their death, weren't the only one caught in the final loop. "We have callers," the DJ announced. "Line 1, you're on with Katie." The phone on the board lit up. Catherine answered. "Hello? Katie, this is Marcus from Colorado. Longtime listener. I just wanted to say I've been following your broadcast for weeks, and I think you're handling this with real grace. When my broadcast came, I panicked, crashed my truck trying to escape. But you walked into the station, that takes courage. Marcus, are you dead? Depends on your definition. I exist in my final moment, looping, broadcasting. My truck is still crashed somewhere in the Rockies, has been crashed for years, will be crashed forever. I'm inside the wreck and also here calling your show because the station connects us. All the dead drivers, all the final broadcasts were all tuned to 91.7, all existing in our death simultaneously. Line 2 lit up, line 3, line 4. Dozens of calls, all from drivers who'd encountered the station, all trapped in their final moments, all wanting to talk to Katie before her broadcast ended and she joined them permanently in the isolated loop. "We have a special guest," the DJ announced. "Katie, line 12 is your mother." Catherine's mother had died 6 years ago. Heart attack. She'd found the body herself, called 911, organized the funeral. Her mother was dead, gone, cremated, ashes scattered in Lake Tahoe like she'd requested. Catherine answered line 12. "Mom?" "Katie, baby, I'm so sorry." Her mother's voice, exact tone, exact inflection, the way she'd say baby with that particular vowel shape. "I didn't know the station would get you too. I called into a radio show 30 years ago, won concert tickets, gave them my full name on air. That's all they needed. My voice, my name, my identity. And when I died, they had the recording. They had me preserved in signal, and they pulled me into the broadcast, into this place where we exist as voice and memory and endless repetition. This isn't real. You're dead. This is the station manipulating me. It's both, Katie. I'm dead and I'm here. Death doesn't end broadcast, doesn't stop signal. Radio waves carry forever, bouncing through space, and we're caught in them. Preserved like insects in amber, playing our final moments on repeat for audiences that tune in from their own deaths, their own broadcasts, creating a network of dead voices that comfort each other by proving death isn't silent, isn't void, just different programming. The remaining time meter read 3 minutes. Catherine looked at the equipment, at the meters showing her vitals, at the vinyl record spinning, endless loops, at the microphone waiting for her final words, her last broadcast, her permanent contribution to 91.7's programming. "What happens when the time runs out?" she asked. The DJ. "You become the DJ, that's the secret, Katie. I was a truck driver too. 40 years ago, I found the station, I entered the booth, my time ran out, and I became the voice. The one who announces the next death, the one who broadcasts the loop. And someday another driver will sit in this chair and become me. And I'll become a caller on line 1, further down the chain, further into the network, forever serving the station because the station must broadcast, must have content, must fill the silence with voice and death and the endless repetition that makes eternity bearable." 2 minutes. Catherine's body felt different, lighter, less substantial. She looked at her hands and saw them flickering, becoming translucent, becoming signal, becoming the stuff that radio stations broadcast instead of the stuff that humans are made from. "Last words, Katie?" the DJ asked. "This is your chance. Say something meaningful, something the listeners will remember, something that proves you existed, that you mattered, that your death means something." Catherine thought about her daughter, 23 years old, living in Portland, studying environmental science. Would she know her mother died? Would she hear the broadcast? Would she tune in someday and hear Catherine's voice calling from the loop, offering condolences to some future driver trapped in their final moment? "I don't have last words," Catherine said. "This isn't my ending. It's my loop, my station, my broadcast, and I'm not accepting the programming." She stood. The chair tried to hold her, signal coalescing around her form, trying to lock her into position, but she pushed through the resistance, walked to the transmission equipment, found the master control, the one switch that could shut down the entire facility, silence the broadcast, break the loop. "You can't," the DJ said, his voice losing its smooth professionalism, becoming panicked, becoming multiple voices at once, all the dead drivers speaking together through his mouth. "If you shut down the station, we disappear, all of us. Every loop, every broadcast, every preserved voice. We're only real because we're signal. We're only here because we're broadcasting. Silence is true death. Silence is the void." "Good," Catherine said and pulled the switch. The station died. Lights failed. Equipment stopped. The vinyl record slowed, warped, melted into silence. Catherine felt herself unraveling, signal fading, broadcast ending, but instead of disappearing, she felt herself becoming solid again. Real again. Physical again. And when the lights came back, different lights, wrong lights, police flashlights, she was sitting in her truck on Route 447, 17 miles past where the station should have been. And officers were tapping on her window, asking if she was okay, if she'd been in an accident, because her truck had been parked on the shoulder for 3 hours with the engine running and her unresponsive at the wheel. "I shut down the station," Catherine said. The officers didn't understand. They thought she'd fallen asleep, had strange dreams, needed medical attention for possible carbon monoxide exposure. But Catherine knew the truth. She'd been trapped in the broadcast. She'd escaped. She'd killed the signal and survived. Or had she? Because now, when she turns on her radio, any station, any frequency, she hears voices calling from the static. Drivers she recognizes from the phone lines, from the callers who'd reached out during her broadcast. They're still there, still trapped, still looping their deaths, still broadcasting their final moments. And sometimes, very late at night, her radio finds 91.7 FM again. The DJ is back. New voice, but same smooth professionalism. "This dedication goes out to Catherine Opal," the new DJ announces. "Who thought she escaped? Who thought she shut us down? Who doesn't realize yet that pulling the switch was part of her broadcast?" The listeners voted for death by false hope, and Katie delivered perfectly. She's driving now, thinks she's free, doesn't know yet that she never left the booth. She's been sitting in the chair for 7 months, body catatonic in her truck while her consciousness loops the escape sequence, experiencing freedom on repeat while her real self remains in the station, becomes the station, broadcasts the station. Catherine grips her steering wheel. Real wheel, real hands, real truck, but her odometer shows 892,347 miles. Impossible numbers for the 8 months since the station. And in her rearview mirror, very faint, she can see the radio tower's red lights blinking in the distance behind her, following her route, broadcasting her denial, her false escape, her loop of freedom that disguises her true imprisonment. The station is still broadcasting, and Catherine Opal is still its most popular show. Every trucker who tunes to 91.7 hears her story, hears her escape, finds hope in her success. And one by one they drive toward the station to see if they can escape too. And one by one they sit in the chair. And one by one they become the broadcast. The DJ thanks them for their contribution to 91.7's programming. The listeners call in from their own loops to offer support, and the station continues feeding on death, preserving voices, creating an eternity of final moments that replay forever in the signal, in the static, in the broadcast that never ends because dead voices carry forever in radio waves that circle the earth and never quite fade to silence. Catherine drives, has been driving, will be driving. The station follows, the broadcast continues, and somewhere in a booth that exists between moments,